What's going on, y'all, and welcome back, or I should say welcome on into a very new Lost Sword video. I'm going to be doing a bunch of guides for you guys, and I can't wait because this is one of my favorite games. Thank you to Lost Sword for sponsoring us. However, I've been playing this regardless of any sponsorship opportunities, and so I'm super grateful and excited to come create some content on this very, very fun and exciting game. And if you haven't tried this out, please do so as well. This game is absolutely amazing. I played on Korea, now we're playing live, and today we're going to cover the latest character who both looks-wise and gameplay-wise I was very excited for. It's a little early to say exactly how good she is, but initial testing for myself, and I know a lot of other people, she looks promising. However, that doesn't mean everybody should pull, so stay tuned. I'm going to talk about everything you need to know, and also if you're free to play, if you're a spender, whatever, we'll cover all of that. So thank you again. Let's get to it. All right, guys, let's first talk about her skills, and then I'm also going to lead into the skill priority upgrades. And I made a major mistake, which I don't want you guys to follow. Her kit is actually very, very unique and very interesting. As you can see here, there's a background character. Her name is Black Swan, and a lot of this kind of revolves around the gameplay loop. It's very, very interesting, and I think this is one of the coolest designs that Lost Sword has ever brought out. Essentially, you get two characters for one, and they look amazing. So looks-wise alone, I would almost say they're a must pull.
How you doing?
Let's go ahead and talk about the gameplay and the performance. Let's start off with the character Black Swan. So Lohengrin summons Black Swan on the ultimate. This is called Climax, and this is where I messed up a little bit. As you can see here, I left the Encore ability for last because when I was just first initially looking at this character without really doing any research and without, looking at the character herself or the skill descriptions very carefully, thought this was kind of just a, one-time effect whenever Lohengrin would receive fatal damage. But since she's a back row unit, that would only occur in very rare scenarios where you're probably wiping either way, or you're in one of those stages where the enemies, the ranged attacks can hit the back line, or you get hit by like some AoE like Tiamat or something. But essentially, I thought this was maybe just for PvP or some rare niche scenarios, and so I left it at level 1, but that was a huge mistake because if you read the skill description like we're going to go through together, you can actually see here that this damage is equal to Lohengrin's Encore skill, and that's where Black Swan is going to unleash a powerful finishing move under the following conditions, and those conditions are whenever Black Swan is unsummoned or she's defeated. Now, that's a lot to kind of grasp if you are just getting into the game, if you haven't even seen this character yet, but essentially the gist of it is Lohengrin, the main character, will summon Black Swan like the clone, the twin, and they both are doing some damage. And essentially, the more you level up that Encore, we're going to get some huge burst damage multipliers, and it kind of happens every time, even when she's unsummoned. It doesn't even have to be defeated, right? And you're going to see here there is a duration on the effects, and so actually I think the skill priority upgrade would be still, I think Swan Knight is still overall better. However, the multiplier on this is insanely good too, so pick either Swan Knight or Encore, and these two are going to be your priorities, the passives, and then that's going to be over Climax and even over Aggressive Dust. So as long as you go for passives before the actives and the ultimates, I think you'll be in a good position. Just be a little careful because upgrading with these skill books, they are very rare, especially the newer you are, even me, because if you get into the training, which we'll cover just very basic stuff on, you need a ton of these skill pages, and you're going to want a ton of characters built. So it actually is important to focus on a priority system. But essentially, let's go through the rest of the skills. This ultimate unlocks or summons the Black Swan, and then you also will have those passives in effect too. You're going to be doing a ton of active damage, a lot of attack speed, and it's just a lot of sustained damage. This character really does some good DPS. Aggressive Dust is the active, good multiplier, forward all enemies, and also gets some crit chance, and the uptime is 100% once it's activated. Duration 12 seconds, cooldown 12 seconds. Very good. The Swan Knight passive, which I said is one of the highest priorities, you're going to have a lot of attack as well as attack speed, and we're going to talk about Lohengrin's pet here too, probably after the initial guide, because I really want y'all to take advantage of this pet while it's here. Attack speed is something that's not very common to get in Lost Sword, and I think we're really seeing how strong this can be with this pet. I think this pet is one of the best in the game, so if you are able to get it, we'll cover that in a second. It does attack speed, a little spoiler, it's going to be very strong. Additional, you do some additional effects as well. This is overall just a very stat stick passive, so make sure you upgrade it. And then last but not least, I kind of covered this already, this isn't only for whenever you proc your immortality when you get fatal hit. This also has a lot of interactions with the summon itself when it's unsummoned and things like that, and the multiplier is crazy. A ton of burst damage, that's AoE, so make sure you upgrade this as well. All right, after the skills, let's quickly talk about equipment, and this is going to be a lot more flexible and dependent on where you're at in the game, but dual blades is one of the equipment that you shouldn't have to wait too too long on. But in general, I'll just talk about stats to go for in case you don't even have access to this yet. The dual blades though are great because they give a just ton of offensive stats and also have added target 3, just very good general purpose. And so I did refine this. However, in general, if you just get anything with big stat stick damage, attack speed is kind of rare, like I was saying earlier, but crit chance, attack, crit damage, all very good. And try to get as high of an added target you can, so that way when you're using her outside of bosses, you can clear more enemies quicker. In terms of the armor, I would say just stick with something that has offense as well, as she is going to be protected in the back line for the most part. And if you don't have that, the Green Knight, which is also kind of a later game item, you can go for something like the Absolute Armor. This is a craftable from one of the events, in which case you get attack percent up as well. If you don't have access to these, just give her any type of armor that has defense, crit resistance, something like that. That way she has a little more tankiness. The armor probably the least impactful, but if you can get some offensive stats on there as a DPS unit, we probably should go for that. In terms of the accessory, the Goddess Ring is also one of the end game items you should try to get, as it does have a high amount of crit chance as well as some high base stats. But in general, anything, once again, no surprise here. If you have like the Crown of the Dead for insane amount of crit, if you have something that has melee attack like the Red Ribbon Ring, this should probably be where most of y'all have access to early, as well as giving, it doesn't have a lot of uptime, but this does have some crit chance as well. Anything, once again, that gives attack. Are you guys starting to get the trend? And then last but not least, on your rune, just make sure you get either attack or some crit damage here, and then once you refine it as well, you get some crit damage on top of that. So very simple. You just go for as much damage on her as possible, because she does have that passive to protect herself, and typically you're bringing a lot of support, and she's one of the unique knights that she sits in the back line, so we don't have to build her super tanky or anything like that. Additionally, one other rune you can go for is one of these extreme runes, which you'll get from normal, hard mode, and hell. And once again, if you refine these right, they just have a lot of stat stick DPS options. Next up, let's talk about her card, as this is going to be one of the things, if you're new to Lost Sword, you guys can kind of see here in my awakening. Essentially, these are the dupes you have for this character. So I have her maxed out. There is actually an awakening portion. I'll talk about that in a second. However, before you max this out or get the card, you have an option to choose either the resonance, which gets you the card, or to transcend them, I believe, which is what you call these dupes. And each of these dupes gives more stats, but we'll get to that in a second. Essentially, I want you guys to understand that you need to make a choice. A lot of times, if you can't max out the character, you trade one copy of it to get their card, and that's how this works in Lost Sword. Now, the card is extremely strong. However, there is another option which a lot of players are saying could be even stronger, and that's going to be Lua's card, and we'll flash that up on the screen for y'all. However, I still think you should get this card, Eternal Bond, regardless if you have the Lua card or not. Now, me personally, I don't have the Lua card. I don't have even a single copy of Lua, so I had to get this, as I think these are only the only two main viable options at the moment, at least her best in slot options. I'm sure you can just slap on anything that gives DPS, like I was saying with her equipment, and you'll be okay. But in the end, you want to go for either the Lua card or her own card, Eternal Bond. And the reason I say you should get this regardless, even if you have the Lua card, and that's because there's a lot of areas like the Tiamat boss, the Star Reincarnation, where you want a lot of characters at the same time, or even just for like some certain boss raids, you're going to want to have your Lua card on a separate character, maybe your Lancelot, maybe your Lisa, maybe whatever, maybe your Neo Bedivere, and that way you can put the Eternal Bond onto your Lohengrin if you're using all of them at the same time. Now, this card is just extremely good because one, it gives, it just gives her everything she wants in terms of offensive stats, melee attack. Even though she's shooting out ranged abilities, she's a knight that has scales off melee attack, ignore damage reduction, and we have even more stats here: basic attack and passive skill damage increased by 35%. So I think you should just get this card regardless, because it is extremely strong and it gives you more versatility when you want to use the Lua card on other characters. All right, next up, let's talk about awakenings. And I covered this a little bit, but these are the dupes and they give you a lot of stats. Now, in terms of just pull priority, or like should you get this character, I am going to show you some DPS. We're going to talk about a boss raid, and we'll break things down a little bit more there. But just in comparison to one of the premier carries in this game, DPS carries, Tiamat, I think Lohengrin is actually very competitive, all things considered. We'll talk about that more in detail. However, just to spoil right now, because I want to talk to y'all about pull priority, I think if you do want to fully invest in this character, she actually can compete with some of the highest damage dealers in the game. Now, I think Tiamat still has a slight edge because of just the way her kit works, and most people already have a invested Tiamat, like either T5, Awakened, all the training done. But if you fully invest in Lohengrin too, I think there's actually a lot of boss fights that she's competitive and possibly even out DPS's Tiamat, given equal amounts of support. Now, if you want to just talk about pull priority or how much copies you get, free to plays, if you already have a super invested Tiamat, you can just get one copy or even skip Lohengrin. However, I do think you should try to get at least one, as she has a lot of unique niche boss. You can bring her in, especially if you play knights and you run things like Deanne, Lancelot, stuff like that. However, I think the most bang for your buck, if you do want to fully invest into her, are going to be at the breakpoints of T3. Of course, you get the skill upgrade, and then T5 as well, you get the skill of the next skill level 2 as well, whereas the other ones just kind of give you some more stats, which are always welcome, but in general you want to kind of get those breakpoints if you're going for multiple copies. Now additionally, the Awakening, I can't show y'all here, but Awakening will give you even more stats on top of that, but you need 2 last additional copies, and even for me, I'm debating on if I should finish this off or not, as well as I think for a lot of players in general, if you're not like a Giga Whale, a lot of times you will just pick up 2 copies through your course of the game, because you just are kind of swarmed with so many summons that you'll probably pick up 1 or 2 copies. You know, it might be sooner than later, might be a long time, but you will probably grab 2 more in the course of your history with Lost Sword. So a lot of times I recommend players to just kind of leave that unless this is like your most used unit. In terms of the specialties, once again, just get anything offensive. A combination of attack or crit damage will be good. And if she's one of your more higher prio units, if you use her a ton, then obviously try to get higher potential between, you know, the yellow, the pink, or the blue stat lines. Now, last but not least, training. Just super simple, guys. Nothing more to talk about here. If you have the stuff, if you weren't building something like Elisa, you probably have a lot of these. Let's see if I can show you the Chaos Runes. Right here, the Chaos Stones, excuse me, and I think she is a worthwhile investment. Like I said, she could compete with the likes of Tiamat, with the likes of Lisa. They all have kind of their unique interactions, but just in terms of raw damage, I think she's extremely good. So feel free to fully invest, and this is another reason to get multiple copies of, as if you are newer to the game, you can't get these special abilities until they are like awakened. So I can't grab this one yet, even if I had all the required resources as well as the skill tree finished. So this is probably the only reason you may want to finish that Awakening. Otherwise, I would just try to get those last 2 copies naturally. All right, guys, next up, I think the boss today is actually a great kind of like sandbag or DPS check. As you can see here, I was talking about how competitive she can be against units like Tiamat, another top premier damage dealer. And you know what's crazy? I actually, when I was recording this guide for y'all, I think I didn't have her card equipped as I was, you know, looking for other suggestions and things like that. So I think she actually did equal or higher damage, but we're going to do another test run. It might take me a few tries to try to get, you know, the right amount of resist and all that. Sometimes there is a little bit RNG and trying to get your DPS up here. Now, of course, this isn't going to be the entire telling of, I talked about earlier, you know, DPS comparisons between Lohengrin and units like Tiamat. Unfortunately, today's boss is actually very good for Lohengrin. I promise I didn't time this just for this video. I'm going to give y'all full transparency. If you don't know how element stuff works in Lost Sword, if you're a little bit newer, there is, of course, an elemental advantage wheel. You know, it's pretty basic. You know, fire beats nature. There are a few things that are a little weird, though, like nature beating radiance, but, you know, lightning beats water. And then, of course, though, Tiamat is being the holy element, which is, you know, the premier element type, which is kind of, you know, agnostic compared to all the other elements. But like I was saying today, Chaos, which is Lohengrin's element, is going to be against Shock. But as y'all can see, I still did score pretty high, despite even, I think, missing a card. So stay tuned. I'll get back to y'all as soon as I finish a run. So just for this purpose, you will see Lohengrin do more damage than Tia. But I think all things considered, Tia is still a better damage dealer. 1, for her element type, and 2, I just think in general she does more damage. But Lohengrin being a knight, the fact that, you know, with Deanne comps, you have another option, and with her, you know, passive, I think in things like PvP, she's also has a slight edge against Tiamat and stages where the enemies attack your back line. I do think there are a lot of factors that make her worthwhile. It's just, once again, if you already have a fully invested Tiamat, don't worry about, you know, full investing in Lohengrin right now, as I do think they compete for a lot of different roles. Long story short, and I'll recap this again at the end of the video, Knight comps will make very good use of Lohengrin, but if you already have a great Tiamat with like Galahad and things like that, you may not need her as much. But I did give, you know, equal amounts of support between Deanne for Lohengrin. This is a support that really buffs up knights, and then Galahad, of course, buffs up rangers and mages like Tiamat. But we did very well. I'm just going to stop here. I could probably get a few more damage numbers out there, but as y'all can see, she's extremely effective in terms of just DPS output. Last thing I want to talk about before we wrap up the guide is the Lohengrin Pet, and this is actually what I was using in the boss raid, and I think this thing is absolutely incredible and might be even more important than Lohengrin herself, especially if you have that Tiamat that I keep talking about. But Lohengrin's Pet has that very rare, first off, let me talk about the stats. I'm getting ahead of myself here, but at Transcendence 5, you just have a nice mix of just overall damage capabilities: DPS, attack, ignore damage reduction, additional damage, and even that very coveted damage reduction to boot. Additionally, this is where it gets really special though, in case you want to use her more than just a stat stick. You have the Allegro passive, which is a very high uptime, like 100% uptime time attack speed, which once again is just really rare in this game. So the other premier like frontliners for DPS, one example is something like the Phoenix Favor for the Phoenix on crit, which gives you just a straight up 10% crit. However, the actual stats that Lohengrin gives in terms of the passives here are even better than Phoenix, I would say. And additionally, there's no Phoenix banners, so as long as your crit is pretty good, I think Lohengrin Pet is actually going to be the #1 option. So highly consider picking this up. But of course, if you're more free to play and you have other priorities, then maybe you don't have this, you just don't have the option to. But I would highly suggest most players, if you want to play competitively, to try to get this Lohengrin Pet. All right, guys, I think we'll wrap things up there. So last but not least, I'm just going to recap everything real quick. Lohengrin is a very strong and super, unique style of knight, not just for the looks, not just for the, the dual waifu capabilities, but just an insanely strong damage dealer that can even compete with the likes of Lisa Tiamat. Tiamat, I still think, has a slight edge. So once again, if you fully invested in a Tiamat on her previous banner, you may not need Lohengrin as much. She's not a must pull, I would say, but I do think if you are a knight player, if you have like Diane, if you play things like a Lancelot comp, I think she has actually a lot of potential and even a more reason to bring than just Tiamat. And essentially, you will want multiple teams for things like the Star Constellation boss. So in general, I think most players should look at picking her up. You just may not need to invest in her as much if you already have the Tiamat. However, for the pet, I think most of y'all watching should try to get the pet, as I think she will be a meta shaping pet in the future for DPS run. So thank you so much for watching. Thank you again to Lost Sword for sponsoring us, and stay tuned for more videos. Peace out, everyone.